Hi guys, how are you doing today? Welcome back to Random Lifestyle Vlog. So today we're going to talk about another makeup palette, eyeshadow palette, and it's going to be the newest release from Natasha Denona, and this is a Retro Glam Palette. So I'm going to show you this palette compared to some other Natasha Denona's palettes. I'm going to show you the swatches and tell you what I think about this palette in general. Is it worth to buy it? Is it an easy one to use? And does it even make sense? Okay, so yeah, let's start. So first of all, this is the packaging, and if you ask me, that shows the name of this palette quite well, because I think it just screams retro glam. So that makes perfect sense. The palette itself, this is how it looks. And to be honest, my first thought when I saw it was like, well, it's all pretty, it's quite unique, but why there's so much green? I mean, this is something I would personally maybe use in springtime or summertime. That was my first thought. But then, I mean, obviously it's more cool toned. Like, you can definitely see that this is more like a cool toned palette. But when I apply this on my eyelids, these eyeshadows come out very not cool, they're like literally frosty. So yeah, that kind of makes sense for winter. I'm actually surprised, but it does. Not necessarily maybe holiday kind of palette, but this is very wintry in the end. I was very surprised with that, but since this was the first thing that came to my mind when I saw it, I thought I would just say it straight away. So as you probably know, Natasha Denona had already released a retro palette and a glam palette. So this is like a retro glam palette, and maybe you could assume that this should be like a mix of these two, or I don't know, maybe something like a connector between these two palettes. Let's have a look. So we're going to start with Natasha's glam palette, so let's have a quick look at both of these. So these are the palettes together, and to be honest guys, I don't really see any similarities between them, apart from the fact that maybe they're both cool toned, but other than that, there's like literally nothing connecting these two palettes. And then this is Natasha's retro palette, and here is the comparison. Again, like no similarities whatsoever. Like, these three palettes are three completely different creations. There's no like similarity between them. So if you have like one of those and wondering whether the retro glam will be a good choice for you, I mean, go for it. As you can see, this palette is in midi size, which to me is the best size that Natasha ever came up with. Her like large palettes, they have the same number of shades, but the shades, the pans are bigger, which for most of us, if we're not makeup artists, then that's not something you're going to use up that quickly anyway. So that makes so much more sense, and also these palettes are much cheaper than the large ones. Alright, let's do the swatches. Flare, rosy red with a metallic finish. Jazzy, dark brown with a metallic finish. Oscar, bronze with metallic finish. There you go. And then we have Evergreen, forest green with a matte finish. So yeah, this one over here. Marlene, mint green with a metallic finish. Maxi, charcoal brown with a metallic finish. That one here. Then we have Sage, sage green with a matte finish. And then Holly, light dusty rose with a matte finish. Fringe, medium mint. Green with a matte finish. Then we have Faye, slate brown with a matte finish. Flutter, gold with a metallic finish. There's this one over here. And then we have Lucy, smoky taupe with a matte finish. This one's actually not very visible on my skin, but that is fine. And then the three last shades, we have Palladian, minty silver with a metallic finish. So that's the one over here. Then we have Belle, mauve with a matte finish. There you go. And then the last shade is Deep Sage. This is also Deep Sage green with a metallic finish. And it's over here. I barely managed to like squeeze them all in. But yeah, these are the shades. And as you can see, some of these shades, like for example, this one over here, you can't really see much on my skin. It's very kind of like it's very muted, very kind of almost pale, but you can definitely see how cold these shades are. They're very kind of cool toned, like very cool toned, very wintry as well. As I said, I did not really expect them to be that wintry, but I really like what I see. And if you look at these shades, for example, there's over here, it's literally like eyes, or this one. I love them. Such beautiful shades. Okay, so let's talk about how these shades perform on my skin. So to do my makeup today, I used these 3 green shades to create a matte base. And then I used these 2 shimmers on my eyelid. I used the Palladium, this shimmer over here in my inner corner, and then I used the flutter on my brow bone here. So that's what's on my upper eyelid, and all these shades performed perfectly. They're really nice. They're not like super hardcore kind of pigmented like you would usually have with Natasha Denona. They're more like muted, but I think this is the whole vibe of this palette, and it kind of makes sense, you know, with like all these kind of like pastel muted colors. It's never going to be like super intense, but I really like what I was able to create with it. Same goes for the shimmers. They are slightly muted. They are not as kind of like buttery and sparkly like some other like Natasha Denona shimmers, but that kind of makes sense. They just give you this kind of icy cold vibe. And also like with the colors that we have here, I think it makes perfect sense. But just bear that in mind, this palette is a little bit different compared to like other Natasha Denona's palettes, and the formulas of the shimmers are slightly different as well. As for my lower lash line, I tried to use these 2 shades over here, and they did not really show that much on my skin, so I am guessing that if you have probably a little bit darker skin tone, this palette might not generally perform that well on your skin. I'm guessing. Obviously I haven't really tested it on like a deeper skin tone. I just tested it on my skin tone, but I couldn't really make these work that well for me, to be honest. So on my lower lash line, I mean, this one showed a little bit, but it was much more muted than expected. This one pretty much did not show. So I tried to add some extra kind of like color with this color here, and still I couldn't really get much of it. I think this would work much better on your finger than on a brush. And I ended up adding a little bit of that maxi shade, and this one finally added a little bit of depth to my lower lash line. But all in all, I think these 3 shades are not really giving me like a very kind of strong color on my skin tone. So all in all, I do think this is a beautiful palette. I think it makes sense as a winter palette for 2 reasons. First of all, the very icy cold kind of frosted vibe, and the second thing is that these shades are quite pale, and I'm not honestly sure if I get like some suntan in summer, like fake tan, but okay. I still like to wear like some fake tan in summertime. I don't think this would actually perform that well on my skin. I can already tell that some of these shades are like barely visible, and judging by what I can see on my swatches, I'm pretty sure that this shade is going to be barely visible on my skin as well. So yeah, it's definitely perfect for now. So would I recommend buying it? I mean, if you have deeper skin tone than mine, I would just test it. I would just test it before buying it, because you know, I have my suspicions. You might not be able to use all those shades in this palette. They might not really perform that well on you. Another thing is, as I mentioned before, this is not your regular Natasha Denona palette. This is more muted. I would compare this in that way a little bit to like Zendo palette. That palette, like the Midi Zendo palette, this one actually had like muted shimmers as well, which was a little bit different, but it kind of made sense as well. That palette was very kind of natural, earthy, and this one is also a little bit like that. All in all, I think if you like the color story, this could be like a nice addition to your palette collection. I mean, the quality is definitely there. The color story is beautiful if you like it, if that's something you like, obviously. It is quite unique. I don't really own any palette like that in my collection, so obviously this was a no-brainer for me. But as I said, this palette is slightly different. Is it easy to use? I think it is. I think because it's not like super, like it doesn't have like super dark colors. It's not, you can't really hurt yourself that much. All the mattes are quite muted. They kind of blend nicely together, so I think it's going to be quite easy to use. If you're a beginner, should be easy. It shouldn't be anything too difficult. So these are my thoughts about this palette. Have you tried it? Is it something that you would recommend as well, or do you think it's maybe not worth the money? If you haven't tried it yet, let me know what you think about this color story for winter. Thank you very much for watching. For more makeup related content, check those videos over here. I'm going to see you very soon. Take care. Bye.